Hi Mairéad.
Girls.
Welcome. Thanks for coming
Thank
into us. Just for the tape, to start, will you just say your name, where you're from and what you do?
Okay. Well, my name is Mairéad Casey. I'm from Newtowncashel in County Longford, which is on the Roscommon border. And I teach dancing and have been teaching it for too long. Time to retire. Yeah, so that's me.
Lovely. Would you bring us back maybe to where you started, maybe some of your first memories, where you learned, who you would have seen first dancing, any of those early memories of you as a kid?
Well, basically as a child I grew up in a house of music, song, dance and story, so we were dancing. I don't remember learning basic steps. I don't remember learning how to swing, anything like that is now very difficult to teach. So it was a natural environment where there was a session nearly every night of the week, and older dancers of no notoriety would come, and you were taken up on the floor and you danced, and you were told to sit down when the time came as well. So that was the start, and maybe when I was 10, Kitty Carberry started teaching step dancing. So I went to Kitty for about 3 years. And her dad and my dad played music together, so there was always a connection anyway. And then I didn't dance for quite a few years. I moved to Dublin and didn't dance for a while, and then found set dancing again with a guy called Tomás McRory, who was from Longford, went to Australia to work back probably in the 50s, and he met a Connemara man who taught him how to dance in Australia, in Melbourne. And he came back and he started, and he was very particular about all the sets. Edwina, you probably knew Tomás. And then it was whoever was around that you were watching at Queally's or at classes, and from that I started going to festivals. One of the earliest for me was 95 in the Galway International, and I went to Mick Mulkerrin in the Gabhann, and from there then I picked up a lot of mixed steps, and we started teaching together, and coming down to Clare to Gabhann's twice a year in Kilfenora. Through that met Willie Keane, so danced a lot with Willie and learned some of his steps, and Paddy Bána Brain of course was a big influence on Mick, and in turn then that was all passed down. So that's kind of, it just keeps going on and on and on, and we're still meeting people today, like young dancers, that you're kind of saying, my God, they were never taught. There's a big difference, you know.
It's great to get the lowdown. You mentioned Kitty Carberry first, and she would have taught you from when you were a kid. Was that step dancing?
Step, yeah.
Step.
Yeah.
And that was at home in Longford, obviously. Yes. And then you were saying about going with Tomás McRory more into set dancing, so it's kind of been a mix between the two.
Yeah.
Ever since.
And Queally, because growing up, what was danced mostly was Queally dances, but there was a local set which was recorded incorrectly as the Longford set. It was the Newtowncashel set, but because the Cashel set was named already, I think they felt that it was, the Bulgers collected it actually, and they thought it was best to put it down as the Longford set. But that was what they called a local set, so all my aunts and my mother was a lovely dancer, they all danced the step for the set, because just like the Gabhann and a lot of the Midland sets, there was a step right throughout. There was no advanced retire, it was all the same. But it was heavy going, you know. I don't think people would do it today. Oh. So that was kind of, the Queallys in them days was all Queally dancing. There was no set really danced around Longford in the 60s and 70s, it was all Queally. And there was a Monday night in Longford, the Glennons, Glennon, his father, Master Glennon they called him, he would have been one of the founder members of the Cultus branch in Longford, and they did Queally dancing on a Monday night, and my father used to go and play and my mother would go and dance. If you were around you joined in that, and that's where a lot of the older Longford musicians, Johnny Duffy, if you know Johnny from Rise the Dust, he would have been there, his father or his brothers, so then that kind of those dancers stayed on and kind of drifted into the set dancing when Tomás started it, and the Bulgers, of course, in Roscommon.
Were there any sean-nós dancers? Or,
Yes.
or, like, I know we don't call them that
Yeah.
years ago, but
Yeah.
you know, the shufflers.
Yeah, there were, and at home there were the few that were well known and would have gotten the courage through the bottle of Guinness. So by the time the night would be coming to an end before they'd appear, and of course it was always men because women weren't out. And there were a few, Tom Conroy, John Matthews. There's a guy actually who would be connected to the Donlans, you know, Pádraig Donlan and Teresa and Nuala. He'd have been a granduncle of theirs, Pam Allen, and they were all great dancers. I can still see sparks going off flag floors, you know, where they but my mother associated that with alcohol. So when I started doing this, going around teaching, she'll turn in her grave now, Lord have mercy on her, but she used to say, would you not go and dance your hornpipe and don't be doing that all drunken dancing. So they associated, that generation associated what we call sean-nós now as drunken dancing. So I think it's interesting because people did get the courage. I think it was just that it wasn't taught. They didn't ever have learned anything structured. And so after the Guinness, they probably got a bit of courage and they just jumped up and did whatever the tune made them do, which was much more natural than I believe than what we're doing today. But anyway, it's my opinion.
Yeah. And would your mother have done a solo dancing, or was it mainly Queally dancing she did?
Queally and set.
Queally and set,
Yeah.
Did they ever speak about your parents or even maybe your grandparents' generation about any travelling dance masters coming around?
Yes, yeah. Travelling dance masters and whistlers that could also dance, which is interesting. You know, there's a guy called Jackie Ivers who travelled from farm to farm more than the dance master went to the rich houses, and the rich children were able to avail of those classes. But then in the middle class and the poor people, there were farm hands that travelled, and they brought the tunes and the dances with them. Well, their interpretation, I'm sure, of the dance and the tune, I'm sure, yeah. So that happened, and there was a lovely story where my father, this guy called Jackie Ivers, used to be giving them tunes in the, I want to say session, but whatever, the gathering at night in the kitchen. And because all my father's family played, they'd get the first part of a tune. He was the whistler now, and he wouldn't give them the second part. So they'd be working across the hedges the next day, and my father would start whistling the first part of the tune that he learned the night before, and your man would automatically go into the second part. So come that night, he had the tune, and your man used to say, where are you getting these tunes? Where did you get the second part? And then finally, after a few weeks of this, he said, across the hedge, I have you now, Handley, and you're not getting the second part. That was it. So I thought that was the simplicity of those days, you know, but anyway.
Before you mentioned the Galway International, and that was huge.
Yeah.
That was such a massive time for set dancing. Can you just speak about that whole resurgence? Because that's really when I feel, for me looking back, that's when I felt like set dancing became this huge wave of, you know, popularity and coolness again.
Yeah, well, I think that started in 1981 or 82, and it was the Pipers Club initially, followed by Connie Ryan, and then of course Mick Mulkerrin, Paddy Hannafin, like the list was endless, the people that were teaching, the Bulgers, and by the time I came into it in 90, I suppose I started learning in 93 from Tomás McRory, and by the time I went to the Galway International in 95, there would have been maybe 10 teachers. But it was well on its way at that stage, like, you know, they had been at it a long time. They had a lot of collecting done. And then Pat Murphy, of course, came on the tails of all that, where he started all the books then that everybody uses as a reference today. But there were books before that from the Pipers Club, and Connie recorded, I think, nearly every set that he collected. And Matt Cunningham did the music for it. So in those days we followed teachers. Do you know, I deliberately went to Mick Mulkerrin. I was advised to go to Mick Mulkerrin. I didn't know who he was because he taught steps. And others were big Connie Ryan dancers, and they went to nobody other than Connie. And Connie had Queally bands that played at his weekends, you know, so you always got Temple House. I think they were his big band. And when I look back at the recordings of all that now, the music was, you know, people complain that music is fast today, like the dance that the Temple House playing set that's recorded. You need air, lots of it. But yeah, I've probably gone off the track now completely, but it's, you try to put yourself back in that situation and the excitement and the exhilaration, and to stand up on the balcony of Sea Point in Salt Hill and look down, especially for the Lancers. I used to think the line-up in the Lancers, I wanted to watch it rather than dance it, because it was just an amazing sight. And I suppose that's how we kind of learned from people sitting, Kilfenora in particular. There were a lot of great dancers that used to go in there, and I would sit and watch just as much as I would want to dance, you know. Even young people, like I have a friend, Caroline Walsh, and she was probably 13 when I first saw her dancing. And I wanted to watch what she was doing, because she's a beautiful, natural Clare dancer. So yeah, there were great times, but they're changed.
I think it'll come back though. I think it will hit that wave again, and like it's all waves. I think there is a younger generation coming up, and it might take like another 10 years or maybe 15, but the Galway International vibe might come back again.
Yeah, I think what we might be losing is the regional, the natural, like Caitlín Midlane. I don't know if you know Caitlín. Caitlín came to class here when we started teaching 20-something years ago, sean-nós. And we made up steps to teach, but which kind of, once you structure anything, you take the natural element out of it. So that, I think that's what we did, that maybe isn't going to allow it come back to being natural. And Caitlín danced at the class today. She just happened to come in with Michael, and we got her, she had a pair of sandals on her, didn't bother her. She didn't have to go looking for shoes, and she had this just a real natural gimp about her, and they loved her. And I thought it was great to get her today, because it was kind of reiterating what we're trying to say all week, you know, try and dance as yourself. But I mean, we all know when we watch competition dancing now that everyone's dancing the same, which is a pity. So maybe it will, Edwina, I'm not sure that it will go back to what it was.
Yeah.
You know.
You chat a little bit about your own, when you get up to do a few steps, then what your own style, where those, how you put together those steps, and what are you thinking about when you're getting up to
Well, I'm
dance
praying that I
routines?
won't fall across myself, number one. I'm praying that I don't go out of time, number two.
Yeah.
No, I don't know. I don't really, you see, it kind of depends on if you have somebody that you know well playing a tune for you, and it's a tune that you know well, and I'm not a musician, so I think maybe we have to listen more as dancers who don't play to music and find what you like, but that doesn't necessarily mean that somebody's going to play it the way you really like to hear it. It's also going to come down to your mood on the day, the atmosphere. So I don't ever kind of have a plan. Maybe that's where I go wrong. I don't actually have a plan. I go out and you know, for years now, if it's the Mulcahy's that play for us on Thursday night here, the New Mown Meadow is like, you know, they're going to play it. Back in the day, the Mairéad Casey bar was one of my favourite. It is one of my favourite reads to dance to, and Seamus Begley was the man for that. Like from toppers of tables to the windowsill out here. Like I remember dancing on a windowsill. He holding me on that windowsill with my head in the window. You know, crazy stuff. Tops of counters. It didn't matter if there was a surface anywhere. We just the higher you were, the better, and your head down, trying to stay up there. But those were the crazy days, and it was great to kind of be part of that as well. You know. And now, I don't know.
Yeah.
We're still trying to do a bit to contribute to the whole thing, and there's so many great dancers out there and great work being done that I think everybody has a niche and a place, and the more influences that people kind of, I believe, the more that they experience, it'll create something different. It's a living tradition, so it's going to keep changing. Yeah.
For when you were growing up, just to go back that time again, we were speaking about the dancers and the travelling whistlers and dancers, but who were playing for the dancers? What musicians locally in Longford? Or were there any coming into the area? Or
Yeah, there was, I suppose, where our house was different in that my father played. His mother was the fiddle player, and he was a flute player initially, and in the time of TB he was told that it was going to wreck his lungs. So he just took up the fiddle, just like that. That's how they did it. And there was 7 of them in the family, and 6 of them played. 5 fiddles, a piper, and 1 made the tea. And everybody danced. It wasn't something you learned to do, like it was just part of it. But then all the locals would come. So there was another fiddle player called Dan Kelly. They were, all lovely, and they all had their own contribution to give. The Carberrys, Peter and Kevin, that would be Noel Carberry's father and Angelina's grandfather. The Donlans, Jim Donlan, and then other cousins that were Donlans as well, that used to come down from Dublin. And because Sean and James Keane, who are my cousins, one left, their father was from Clare. So he was a very popular man. If they knew that Pat was going to be around, then a lot of others would travel because he had Clare tunes, pre-recording, that they didn't have, unless a visiting musician came, they didn't get those tunes. So as a result, the house was kind of always and you'd have people coming back from the States. We had all the Coleman records, the windy gramophones. So there was a lot of music around, but we just took it for granted, because that's what we did. So yeah, Newtowncashel had a lovely little hub, and still does, thankfully. Noel Carberry is still playing. I have cousins that still play. My brother plays. So, and James Keane next week is going to do a little tribute night in Cashel to all of those that are gone. Yeah.
Would the music and the musicians and the singers and dancers have gathered in the same houses, or would it have moved around different houses, or where would they have gathered around the parish?
Mostly our house. Yeah. Because it would have, in the previous generation, I think that's nearly all they did, was stayed up all night playing music. There was stories that my grandmother used to say, you can't go home until we get daylight to milk the cow to make you the tea. They had no milk left. Do you know this? People told me these stories, but by the time we became more civilised in our generation, that could be 4 nights a week. And there are nights you could go to bed maybe, and you'd be just drifting off to sleep and you'd hear the pipes, or Pete Carberry would be after arriving, or Patsy Hanley was another major visitor to the house. Mickey Flynn, I'll probably start to remember them when I'm going out the door.
But the floor would have been open, and
yeah,
anyone could.
Yeah, whoever decided to come, and there was no such thing as making a plan. People just turned up and they played until whenever they felt like going home. Yeah.
Were there other steps? So you've spoken about the Newtowncashel step for the set. Were there any other steps, whether it was percussive in regards a set step or step dancing? Were there any steps that were significant to that area or Longford?
No, I wouldn't have said so. Like we spoke about the natural dancers, that got up and danced. They were more percussive in that they just tapped out the tune. So there wouldn't have been a step that you could have, They did the heel work, they did the toe and the whole shebang, but and I suppose as somebody very small, you're not focused on exactly, you're just taken by the whole overall picture of these big men, top coats, no dancing shoes, boots, hobnail boots. Yeah. No, I don't think so, Edwina. I honestly don't think there was an emphasis on steps or footwork. I believe that we created that. Maybe with coming from having done a bit of step dancing, that it influenced us in creating steps to teach. And I still say that that's where we took the natural element out of it. Anything you have to teach, you structure it, and therefore you're changing the whole natural thing. But I don't know how we teach it without doing that, so it's catch-22.
And speaking of big men in top coats, did you ever do the Straw Boys?
No, we did the Wren Boys.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, but the Wren Boys, we didn't wear straw hats. We just got whatever, old clothes and sheets with holes in it and eyes kind of drawn and lipstick on. God. Yeah, but it was similar. It was the same kind of thing. You went around and I remember a lovely story of, I had an aunt that was a character. She was a psychiatric nurse in Dublin, and she was a great character, and going on in their day now, going hunting the wren, and they were hungry, and somebody had left the carcass of the turkey with probably half a side on it in a utility room or a back kitchen, whatever it was at the time, and she robbed it and brought it with them and took it and ate it up the road. And like, she was known, she could do things like that, but she had robbed half of the turkey because they were hungry. So you could imagine that family when they went to have dinner. Stevens's day was the day it was done. And then they'd have wren dances and whatever money they'd collect in someone's house or a hall or something. Yeah.
Will you demonstrate the Newtowncashel step for us?
Of course. Who's going to play?
I'll play.